Hello and welcome to Kushti TV. As promised, 5 more tales of classic fights, stories that I know are true, because I would know the people involved. Yes, so they're legendary stories that I know are factual. The previous 5, I believe you fairly much enjoyed. It was fair bit of demand. You guys out there asking me, let's have a bit more of that. So anyway, we've got 5 classic tales, and I'm going to start with the first one. They're not only fights as before, they've got a meaning, and I'm going to put a name to them. The first one is called Close Encounter. Okay, yeah, it's 1939, Maidstone in Kent, and the people involved is the legendary Jack Daley. Jack Daley, my grandfather. This is how I know the story. And he fought a man by the name of young Barton. Didn't know young Barton's name, but got the name Barton, surname, but how he got the name young Barton, I wouldn't know his real name, in all honesty, but I know the name was given to him, young Barton, against Jack Daley. I knew some of the Barton family, some of them were friends of mine. Anyway, how did this fight get on, and why did it get called Close Encounter? Well, young Barton, clearly a fearless man, took on Jack Daley with a massive reputation, a really well seasoned boxer, Jack Daley, and Jack Daley was more suited to outside game, because every time you read a write-up on Daley's fights, you just see how game he was. He could get off the floor, cut eyes, cut lips. He just game as a pebble. So punches and cuts endured in knuckle fighting meant nothing to this warrior. But it had to command the bravery of young Barton that took him on, and young Barton insisted that they fought in a pig pen. Yes, so can you imagine a pig pen? I mean, the biggest ones I've seen, I think you can barely stand up on them for the farmers to put their feed in, but it was a pig pen they fought in, and they should see which one had come out, and apparently it was a ferocious battle. Daley, by his own admissions, had said that he'd never had a fellow traveller push him so close in a knuckle fight. He went in for around 10 minutes, and can you imagine, literally, in a pig pen, nowhere to go? I mean, it's probably a fifth the size of a boxing ring, maybe a quarter, and you couldn't even probably stand tall. You could imagine the lever that was thrown on, in this case bare knuckles. 10 minutes the fight went on, and by Daley's admission, he said he had nothing but praise for young Barton. He said he had to pull out every piece of energy and trick in the book to stop the warrior young Barton, and he said it was clearly the closest he'd ever come to getting defeated in a bare knuckle fight. So that took place in no bad blood after. I believe there was beers after, and an handshake, and done it in the proper old-fashioned way. Yes, Daley in a close encounter. I call this fight a close encounter for 2 reasons. It was a very close fight, Daley's admissions, and it was in a pig pen in Maidstone in 1939. Yes, so yeah, that's the first story, and there's 1 of 5. Next story brings me into Love Thy Neighbour. Yes, Love Thy Neighbour. Right, yes. How did we get the name Love Thy Neighbour? Well, just wait. It was another classic fight, refereed by the previous kings of the Gypsies, the Les Stevens, late Les Stevens, and Johnny Frankham. Yes, 2 absolutely kings and warriors. They were refereeing the fight, and the fight was between the young blonde bombshell, Johnny Brazil, one of the hardest punchers, already an ABA champion. Johnny Brazil was going to turn pro around the welterweight division. He was massively tipped. He was trained by Les Stevens and adored by his fans for his bouncing, moving from side to side, bringing beautiful punches left, right. He really was a cream of the crop boxer. Johnny Bloomfield, the legendary trainer Johnny, who had taken Frank Bruno to the world title and cornered him in the fight against Mike Tyson, had padded John Brazil, and he said, pound for pound, of all the professionals he'd ever trained, Johnny Brazil was the hardest hitting pound for pound he's ever taken on the pads. He said he had devastating power. Yes, well, who stood in his way was Adam Reed. Adam Reed with very little boxing skill, but he was building a reputation as a knuckle fighter. And in the town of Staines, Adam Reed lay a challenge down just purely to see who was the best. Now, Adam, given this vast boxing experience away, I mean, Johnny Brazil was tipped by, you remember the Freddie Starr, the comedian, his manager actually wanted to fund him and said he will be champion of the world by the age of 25. He was that good. He really was looking to go places. But Adam Reed had other ideas. He wanted to build a reputation. This fight was nothing more. There was no bad blood. Adam just wanted to fight John Brazil to see who the best young teenage fighter out there was. Well, John was around 17 and Adam was around 19. I think Adam was born in 1963, John 1965. And this fight was called on. And as I say, fair play man was Les Stevens. He had a great interest in Johnny Brazil as his trainer, and Johnny Frankham. And the reason I give this fight called Love Thy Neighbour is it took place in Oxford on a council estate in a back garden. Yeah. And whilst they went at it on a Sunday morning, heads were appearing all the way over to watch this classic fight. Anyway, Brazil, with the experience, went about doing the business on Adam, catching him with body shots, head shots, and it appeared that he was doing fairly well. And Adam then put the head in, and Johnny Franklin, the man himself, had pulled Adam away sternly and given him a complete telling off because he's a fair play man. He gave him the full instructions as a fair play man should. So there was no more red button, and he then pulled Brazil aside and said, right, we're back to your business and the way you go again. And they went back to the business, and it was Johnny Brazil continuing to dish out most of the punishment, but that couple of years, maybe age difference and a couple of stone weight advantage, Johnny just couldn't seem to have a real impact on Adam Reed. And eventually, by Johnny Brazil's admissions, he just said he was just a little too strong for me. He said I was doing fine in the boxing stakes, but he said that a little bit of age and weight, I just couldn't handle him. He said he was just a little bit too manly for me on that day. Now with John's admission, but apparently it was a great fight, and Love Thy Neighbour, the council estate, was heads popping up like meerkats. Apparently they had a great view on this council estate in Oxford, and apparently it went on for around 15 minutes, and apparently it was a great fight, classic fight. And sadly Johnny Brazil went on to turn professional, and wage packet disagreement at the 11th hour. He actually never fought as a pro, even though he signed up, and found that a bit disappointing. So the hypes and predictions for Johnny Brazil, we never really witnessed, because that was it. Boxing career was over. And even more sad for the young Adam Reed. I knew Adam actually from a little boy. He's quite a bit older than me, but I knew the Reed family quite well. And yeah, so I had a couple of good stories with Adam. He's about 9-10 years older than myself, but even when I was a 5-year-old, I remember him getting me into mischief. And sadly, Adam making his way back home, I think it was in the around the Henley area, Henley upon Thames, out that way somewhere, lost control of his car and sadly died. And I think Adam was aged just 21, maybe 22. And down in Long Lane and just outside of Heathrow, I've been to his grave, and he's got a wonderful tribute by his family on the grave, where he's actually in flow fighting Johnny Brazil. They're actually, he's guard up, he's not posing for a picture, he's actually in flow, and you can see the picture. I thought that's a great tribute, but it was a great fight, and there was no bad blood after. They went about their business as it should be. So Love Thy Neighbour was a classic, great fight. Hope you enjoyed that one. Fight number 3, if you can't beat them, join them. Yes, that's what I'm calling this one. If you can't beat them, join them. Yes, it took place, I'm slightly uncertain of the year, I think it was around 1987, in Edmonton, North London, between the Jimmy Stockings and Johnny Love, and I'll give you the reason why I called this fight. If you can't beat them, join them. Johnny Love, become a professional boxer, massive one-hit puncher. Stockings walks on, early fight in the morning. They both had been out the night before. It started over a gambling debt. Stockings was having a gamble with another fellow pool player, and Johnny Love insisted on playing, and Stockings said, look, I'm doing some money here, and a chance to get my money back. And without further ado, a fight erupted. Stockings clumps him, and it goes off in the pub, and it's arranged for the next day. So Stockings comes out, meets head on Johnny Love. Massive right hand goes down. Jim goes down all the way down, smashes his head on the concrete, and he makes it dazed, staggers to his feet somehow or another. He makes it to his feet, a massive hole, blood gushing out of his head. And Jim's brother, Tommy Brown was a fair play man, and Jim's brother Wally says, you can't carry on with this. He says, and Jim says, I can carry on. I won't go down anymore, and neither did he. Continued fighting in his massive long fight. It's reported 1 hour and 3/4. Somewhere during the fight, this long fight, Stockings puts down Love. Yes, now it's Love's turn to get up, groggy, down and out, shake himself off. But this massive long fight continues. But eventually, Stockings can't see, his eyes closes, and it transpires. I said, we'll go to the pub for a beer. He goes down for one beer and pukes, he's sick violently, Stockings. And he says, you know, even an old man like him says he has to go to the hospital to get things checked out. When he goes there, the first blow that he had taken onto the concrete gave him a fractured skull. So he fought for 1 hour and 3/4 with a fractured skull, gives you some idea. Yeah, he's only proper, straight, sober defeat. He lost fights in drunken states and pub brawls, but straight up fights, his only defeat to Johnny Love. Johnny I'd met, we both went up Epps and Downs to have a fight respectively, not with each other. He was meant to be fighting somebody and I was looking to fight somebody else, and none of the fights transpired to go off, but we did have a beer together. That was my meeting with Johnny Love. Sadly, Johnny was found found dead with a gunshot wound in confusion circumstances. I don't really know the finer detail, but sadly, a young man, and a couple of occasions I was out with him. He was a nice man. Yeah, so thoughts for Johnny there. And yeah, how did I give the name of the fight? If you can't beat them, join them. Well, the police had turned up, yeah, and to stop the fight. And they weren't having none of it. There were too many people, so the police couldn't actually beat them. When I say beat them, I don't mean physically. They couldn't really overpower them, arrest them. So the police had given up the idea of trying to arrest people and stop the fight. They just stood back and said, right, we'll join them. Let's watch. So they went back and actually applauded the fight when it had finished. When Stockings eventually had to quit because he couldn't see anymore, and they give a round of applause. If you can't beat them, join them. That was the police's motto, yeah. Another classic fight. Fight 4, yes, the War of Love. I've called this one the War of Love. Yes, and again it involved Jimmy Stockings and Creamy Eastwood, Tom Creamy Eastwood. Both these blokes cousins of mine. Lonesome site, South West London, 1981 was the venue, and the packed crowd had come from all over the country very quickly to get on anyway. There was 500 or so people crammed into this gypsy site, and the way they went, Tom Cream Eastwood, an heavyweight, Jimmy Moore around I suppose in these days the light heavyweight division as he developed. And Tom Creamy Eastwood is dishing out a massive beating to Stockings. Massive. People can't believe, even to this day, how he was withstanding the punishment. So much he was even sticking his chin out, giving 3 punches away. Tom Creamy Eastwood is relentless, a beautiful boxer, become an unbeaten professional. I've spoke about him before. He knocked the legendary Gary Mason down in sparring. Yeah, he beat Andy Gerard twice. Andy Gerard beat Noel Mopas, the Central Area champion. There's some real form there. He was a creamy, his nickname, but he was a cream of a fighter. And he's got sticking his left hand in Stockings, just like bash, 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 boom, bash. And Jim had very little regard for his face. But Tom Creamy Eastwood was a boxer and about to become a professional boxer. He did regard his hands, and his hands were smashing into Stockings' face so much that his hands were coming up like footballs. And so he respected, after around 20 minutes or so, he respected his hands, but Stockings didn't respect his own face. And his hands and ribs, Creamy Eastwood, and eventually he gives Stockings, he said, "You can have that one." And he later said to me and Creamy got the same gran, and bless her, our Granny Mare and Mary, and he says to her, "You know what, Gran?" He said, "This Stockings, man," he said, "there's something wrong with him." He said, "You'd actually have to kill him to beat him." And that was a sort of thing that Stockings had put on the line. The superior fighter was Creamy, but the other one was just so willing. It was a war, just so willing to keep going, keep going, keep going. And when the fight had finished, referees for this fight was good friends of Jim Stockings, Mark Ripley and Kenny Sines. And later Jim had a bit of a feud and fight, Jim and Wally, with Kenny Sines, but at this stage there was no bad blood, they were friends. And they were the referees. And after the fight had finished, Jimmy had arrived in chauffeur-driven car, a Range Rover by the legendary Les Stevens. And Les says to Jimmy, because he's fairly on his plot, Les has come quite a way, so he give the boy the full treatment, chauffeur-driven him, top of the range Range Rover car. And I don't know if it was fear of Les's seats getting completely obliterated with blood, but he offered Jim, he was on his own patch fairly much, joking aside, and Jim made his own way. He was round friends, congratulating, shaking hands, and he'd arranged to meet the boys back for a beer, including Creamy. And the reason I give this fight the War of Love, when it was time for Jim to leave the site and to get a lift home, he jumped in with 3 of Creamy's uncles. Yeah, so he's left home, just a fight with the nephew, and you see where I'm coming from, the War of Love. They've had a war, but what does it matter? It's just a fight. So he then jumps in with Creamy's uncle, with my uncles, Joe, Charlie, yeah, and Cliff, and the way they make it home, just jumps in the transit van. All right, boys, yeah, let's go for a beer. That's the way it was. What a beautiful way to do a fight. You had this war, and it's just done. That's just done. You know, all the knife crime and the gun crime in the 30 years. I just love it. I don't know if you love it at home, but the War of Love, Lonesome Sight, 1981, Tom Creamy Eastwood and Jimmy Stockings. And finally, number 5, I'll give you half of what I've got. That's what the name of this one is. In 1945, Aldershot. Yes, the legendary Johnny Frankham, King of the Gypsies, his father, Jim Frankham, and one of my great uncles, Tom Brazil, yes, my granny's brother from my dad's side. Tom Brazil, yeah, a fight erupts, like it so often happens, in a drunken state, and Tom comes back, sees himself in the mirror, he's not happy. He don't actually know what's happened, but he's took a bit of a walloping. He don't know if anybody else is involved. Nobody was ever accused of any sinister foul play, but he just don't know what's happened. And he is adamant that he wants a return fight with Jim Frankham to see what happens when they're sober. And who to see fair play? Jim Frankham's best friend and Tom Brazil's brother-in-law, Jack Daley. Yes, so you're going to get a fair fight with this man officiating. And the way they went about it, and apparently they stripped down to their waist, and they were 2 supreme fine looking specimens of men. They really were in great shape, and the way they went, and they had a fantastic fight. It went on for about 15 minutes, and Frankham having the best of the argument, it has to be said, and I think Daley was happy, brother-in-law and best mate, to coax them. I'm not a huge fan of draws in fights, but I think he coaxed them to call it a day, call it off after about 15 minutes. There was no dispute, Frankham was the head of the fighter, but the other one was standing on his feet. And yeah, so this wonderful fight had taken place, and Brazil was very happy with it. He said, because I knew exactly what had happened. He actually told me the story. He said, when I finished the fight, I was really happy, because I knew it was me fighting, not the drink, not anybody else. It was just me and Jim. And they sat down around the fire having had this wonderful, beautiful fight, and this is where I've named this fight. I'll give you half of what I've got. Now, the women preparing the dinner, they sat around the fire, they ran a gypsy encampment, ran the wagons, and they went round the fire. Sunday's dinner was cooked on the old kettle iron, as we call it, and pots. Food was cooked and prepared, and I suppose, arguably, there was either not enough dinner, or the ladies preparing it was in the Brazil camp, was reluctant to give it to Frankham. They may have deemed him as an enemy. But when the dinner was put down, Brazil says, "Get me another plate, get me another plate." Oh, he's insisted on getting another plate. So the other plate come out, and he went, "Right, come here, Jim." He calls Jim Frankham over, and he goes, "After dinner for you, after dinner for me." What a fairy tale story. Come on, mate, let's get it right. Look at the hatred in people sometimes today. These boys have had a bloody fight, 15 minutes. A proper fight. Two good men going at it. And he just calmly sits down, and just gives him half of his dinner. Just splits it straight in half. I'll give you half of what I've got. And so much so, those two men become best friends. My Uncle Tom, my great Uncle Tom Brazil, was a strawberry and flower seller. And I went to see him one day, and he always had a cup of tea in tow, and he made me a cup of tea, and he said, "My best friend," they were in latter years now, these men were old men, and he said, "My best friend, Jim Frankham and his wife Janie, have just left me and my wife. They've been here for a couple of hours." What a wonderful story. Uncle Tom, Aunt Fanny, selling the strawberries. Best mate comes in 50, 60 years after the fight, still best mates. I hope you've loved and enjoyed these stories, I know they're all fact. I can only just keep dreaming up the stories. When I say dreaming them up, get them in my mind. When they come to me, I'll give them. But I can only tell you the ones that I know are factual. I hope you've enjoyed. Yes, you keep on subscribing, and I'll keep on giving. Yes, in the meantime,